Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Fellow Amazonians and fellow Africans. For more than 3 years, I have stood high. I have walked the valleys. I've walked the mountains of Africa, trying to bring about the plight, to expose the plight of the people of Amazonia. Since the killings started 3 years ago, the closure of schools, the closure of courts, the closure of hospitals, dispensaries, the destruction of infrastructure, the cutting off of telephones and internet supply to the people of Amazonia. I have stood high amongst the people of Africa to fight for the restoration of the rights of the people of Amazonia. Yesterday was yet another darker day for the imprisonment of 10 Amazonians who stood for peace, who talked for peace, who wanted to be heard, who wanted dialogue, and were ready to put dialogue down as a basis of discussion to bring about a peaceful end to the conflict of Amazonia in Cameroon. For these 3 years, I've called upon the international community, upon African Union, to bring a debate to the table of the African heads of state about the suffering of the people of Amazonia. I have done it voluntarily, walked, traveled to African Union in summits, trying to fight for this debate to be brought on the agenda of African Union summits. I have petitioned the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Baroness Scotland, my friend, in a letter that I dispatched to both the Commonwealth Office of Her Majesty the government in Britain and in the Commonwealth, in the fight for the people of Amazonia. I've done my best. I've interviewed the people on these television stations. I have done my best. I've interviewed various leaders from Saku, from the others, Tapu. 7 of them have been on my television station. Mr. Kanga, all of them, most of them, and I will continue to do so, to interview most of them who will take part in the fight for the restoration of a state called Abazonia. I have not and I will not take any intimidation, neither will I succumb to any pressure from Paul Obia's cohorts and his surrogates who roam around the world distorting the facts about what is happening in Abazonia. I am not a Cameroonian, I am a Pan-African. A Pan-African who wants a peaceful Africa. An Africa cannot integrate when one part of Africa is being destroyed by a dictator called Paul Biya. It is impossible. Therefore, we call upon the international community, the United States of America, the British government to intervene, to give freedom to the people, the 10 men jailed for life for having asked for dialogue, to speak with the president or the people of Cameroon to find an amicable solution for the people of Abazonia. I call upon the Commonwealth, the AU, the United Nations, ECOWAS, SADC, East African Community, IGAD, to put pressure on the people of the government of Cameroon to give dialogue a chance in an event. Also call upon Switzerland, which is taking part in making that people negotiate, to now look at this new threat as a threat that can change the dynamics on the ground. The war that has been taken to the people of Abazonia cannot stop when the basic needs of the people, the suffering of the women, the children who have never gone to school for the last 3 years is not lifted. I want to thank you very much, all of you who have listened to my discussions for the last 3 years, that I will continue doing so until there is a solution found for the people of Abazonia. Long live the people of Abazonia. Long live African unity. Thank you.
First of all, let me thank you. I've prepared 2 papers which I believe will be circulated because they'll not be projected. But if you can see, first of all, I want to agree with the Honorable Minister. I've done 2 pictorials. One of them is described as Africa at the dinner table. And if you look at Africa at the dinner table, Africa is on a plate and it is meat. And the diners at the dinner table are France, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, the Chinese, and progressively the Arabs. And my second picture is the African hotspots. It's not visible from there. But if you look at Africa today and you make a clean sweep with your mind, there are different conflicts of different intensity in Somalia, in northern Mauritania, in northern Mali, in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea-Bissau, in the Cameroons, in South Sudan, and one can go on and on. And there is a sense in which Africa has always been alive to the question of interference. I will refer this audience, particularly those who are starting, to take time and read the 32 odd speeches that were made in the month of May 1963 by the then heads of states and government of independent African states, the 32 of them. And there are two speeches that I want to isolate for this presentation. One was by David Dacko of Central African Republic. And in thanking Emperor Haile Selassie and Kwame Nkrumah on that day, he said that we must never forget that the colonial power has not left us. We must recognize that he did not go willingly. And if we don't check them, they'll come back again. And what would little Central African Republic do against them? Today, he is right. Today, if we remember the activities of France and how they propped up the regime of Jean Bedel Bokassa, he was right. Today, as the Honorable Minister has indicated, Africa remains the only continent in the world that is referred to in these terms, Anglophone, to mean that we are a sphere of our erstwhile colonizers. About 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting of the Commonwealth in London, England. And a friend of mine who is an Anglophile sent me the photograph very gleefully, saying this is a meeting of 53 equal states. I told him, no. If it was so, why is it that the leadership of the Commonwealth is hereditary rather than rotational? In other words, in the minds of the British, her former colonies are still under her tutelage. And I want to submit to us that in the minds of what I'll call the conceptual West, they think they have a divine duty to instruct Africans what to do. True. And in the minds of many African leaders, they think that they have a divine duty to accept what they are told. That, in my view, is what the Honorable Minister was talking about, the mindset. And this is something that has been examined. We have seen France and its very pernicious presence in Africa. We know what they did in Burkina Faso against Thomas Sankara. We know what they did in Mali or the Sudan against Modibo Keita or against Sekou Touré in Guinea. Pernicious to the core. The Portuguese, we know what battles had to be fought in that area. And let me put this very bluntly. When the former leader of Portugal, Marcelo Caetano, was asked, why can you not allow the colonies to gain independence? This is what he said in substance. As I have examined world history over the years, the following have emerged. That the Caucasians have been responsible for monumental discoveries in the development of man. So have the Chinese, so have the Arabs. But the Africans have been responsible for nothing. They are only fit as hewers of wood and drawers of water. And I want to submit to you who are present here that in the conceptual West's unguarded moments, that is what they think. And that is how they relate to Africa. So the whole idea that they will interfere is something that they think is their God-given duty. I said there were two speeches in 1963 that I wanted to refer to. I referred to David Dacko. The second one was the speech by Kwame Nkrumah. And Kwame provided the solution. He did not complain about colonialism. He said, we must live here with one army, with one command. We must live here with one currency. We must live here with one currency, one country. I do not know where its capital will be, but I suggest Leopoldville or Bangui. Other leaders may have their thoughts. Kwame was right. But who listened to him? Several years down the line, and I've said it in my paper, there were coup d'etats which were engineered, there were mutinies which were engineered, and other forms of destabilization. And I want to believe that the person who actually said it very well in the 1980s was the former American President Ronald Reagan. He said, the United States of America does what is in her best interest. And I agree with him. Does Africa do what is in her best interest? Do African leaders do what is in the best interest of Africa? Interference will be there in very blatant and brazen ways and in subtle ways. I've always asked, until very recently, how many African countries manufactured bullets? Very few. Until very recently, how many African countries, in fact, how many African countries manufacture jet fighters? How many African countries are involved in the arms industry? Some of the leading conceptual West countries which pontificate to us about prizes, peace prizes, are the leading manufacturers of landmines. And if you look at their foreign exchange earners, it is the military and security items. So they say with their mouths, what do they not believe in their hearts? In Kiswahili we say, vita vya panzi furaha ya kunguru. That when the locusts are fighting, it is the joy of the hawk. Because when they kill each other, they get the food easily, dead. It is in the best interest, I dare submit, without fear of contradiction, that the elite in the conceptual West does not want Africa to stabilize, despite their assertion to the contrary. And you'll see it in every country because conflict is a major industry. Today, you look at South Sudan and the many peace conferences that are being held, but if you ask who supplies the arms, who provides safe havens, it is the conceptual West. And when I use the term conceptual West, I'm saying that it extends to countries which are geographically not in the West, like Australia or Canada. So I'm submitting in answer to your question, Joe, that interference is there, and it is part, to use this old cliche, of the neo-colonial project. The neo-colonial project requires that Africa must remain within the sphere of influence of these states. Today, if you look at the United Kingdom, which has left Europe, one would have thought that those are their cousins and that they should sit in comfort with them. You will now see their involvement being de-emphasized in Europe and their interest and appetite growing towards the Commonwealth. Because in the Commonwealth, they are the major domos. They'll tell us what to do. In Europe, they have to grapple with the Germans and the French, and they don't like it. That is the unspoken bit of it. The French also are in Europe, but the Germans are too strong, and they don't like it. So they want to hold Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, and tell them what to do. I do not know how many of you saw the press conference that was attended by President Macron of France and Nana Addo of Ghana. And when Nana Addo spoke as an African should, you could see the body language of the French president. How dare this man speak this way? In other words, I'm saying that interference is the mother's milk of European economies. But to answer your second question, they have their own recruits who Professor Philip Nying'oro will be speaking here. To use the old vocabulary of those days, they have the people you call their comprador bourgeoisie. You must remember. The comprador bourgeoisie are Africans with black faces, but essentially they are doing the bidding of these powers. They are the ones you'll find them in different spheres. And they will be present. They are in your cabinet, but they are actually representatives of the foreign intelligence agencies of those countries. We know this. If you look at the declassified papers from the United States, we now know that some of leading cabinet ministers in many African countries were working for the CIA, or some Western agency. So you are sitting in cabinet, and in these days of the mobile phone, they are possibly texting their masters in Europe and America. So interference is also exacerbated by these comparative bourgeois for their own benefits. And it has never changed, Honorable Minister. In the early days of slavery, they gave some of the chiefs mirrors and alcohol. Today, what they give them are flats in Paris or in Dubai. And that is what makes them undermine Africa. The third mode of interference is through institutions. Look at the competition as it is now. There is a new entrant into the market that is called China. China is very subtle. Many people wrote the obituary of Rwanda in 1994. 20 years down the line, it has been demonstrated that Africans can actually do it. Between 1983 and 1987, I think Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso also demonstrated that it can be done. We saw in Somalia, despite their problem. So my prescription is African unity. Africa must now begin to negotiate initially in terms of blocks, SADC, ECOWAS, East African Community, and ultimately as African Union. And lo and behold, we must do it. And I've always said this cliche, we must do it, because if we don't do it, we will be done. Thank you.
A very good morning to you, wherever you're watching us. If you're watching us from Africa, of course, and some parts of Europe, it's still good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching us elsewhere in the world. This is Good Morning Africa show, where we bring you all the latest news making headlines across the continent, and of course from Kenya here. And today we have a lot in store and some sad news coming from South Africa. A new spate of xenophobic attacks. I've seen some of our viewers already commenting on it. A very sad happenings there from South Africa. It's a shame, and we will look at that a bit much later. And of course, like I've said, the show is Good Morning Africa, the 3rd of September 2019. My name is Miriam Gotu, and let me just go through, of course, with today's headlines quickly. From Kenya, the legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta, and then we look at corruption with a very special case of an expose that was done in regards to Maara University here in Kenya, and then we'll come to the news headlines from across Africa, and then we'll continue to discuss the rest of African stories as we continue. So I have also some very interesting developments from South Sudan, and also I think some very worrying news from Cameroon, especially the Anglophone region. So you don't want to go too far. Stick around and I'll bring you that. But right now, let's look at the legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta, and that is quite captured on today's Standard newspaper on page 7. And ministers, the Standard newspaper on page 7 says, ministers ordered to implement the BBI agenda. If you are aware, or you might have been aware right now, BBI, this was something that was said after the handshake of President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga in an aim to bring Kenyans together and try to dig into the matters that really cause a lot of problems and chaos every 5 years during the electioneering period here in Kenya. So the sum of the things that they were looking at, and so I'll just read the key points that are supposed to be the government now have ordered the ministers to make sure that they implement the BBI agenda. So that tells you how President Uhuru Kenyatta means business when it comes to the implementation of the BBI and the unity of this country. So let me just read a few lines and maybe we can get the gist of it. And it says cabinet secretaries have been directed to ensure their respective ministries implement interventions envisaged in the Building Bridges initiative and formed by President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga, and head of public service Joseph Kinyua in a circular address to all CSS and the Attorney General list support for BBI among key areas. Ministries, departments and agencies will have their performance evaluated. So it's that serious. So it continues to say, in the circular dated July 19th, 2019, support for the Building Bridges initiative by implementing interventions aimed at promoting national unity and nationhood. And that is the core of the BBI, promoting cohesion here in the country. And that is listed among 8 commitments in the 2018 Presidential Annual Report, against which ministers' performance will be assessed this year. So all the ministries will be assessed by how well they're actually implementing, because they're the implementers. All the ministries in this country, they're the implementers of this. The performance will be based on how well they've implemented the BBI. Of course, when we'll have they're supposed to be presented to Kenyans. The team, I think, is now finalizing its findings, and the report is supposed to be presented to the president in October, and hopefully to the public. So whatever the findings and the agreement that will be done thereafter, then the ministries have the mandate through the ministers that the cabinet secretaries that are responsible in the different dockets to make sure that everything that has been agreed on has been implemented. And it goes on to say that in performance contracts for the 2019-2020 financial year, MDAs are required to implement at least 5 commitments relevant to their mandate among the Big Four agenda. So that is also very important. Remember, the Big Four agenda is what actually Uhuru Kenyatta is hoping Kenyans will use the yardstick to see how much he has performed, or how well he has served Kenyans, especially in his second term. Remember, the first term was plagued with a lot of things. When he started, he was still trying to clear his name from the ICC, so that took a lot of his time and a lot of his concentration. So he really didn't get to work properly, perhaps the last 2 or so years. Before we know it, we were back to the electioneering period. So the first term of President Uhuru Kenyatta, not really much was done. But in the second term, he came out and they gave he gave 4-point agendas to Kenya, and he called it the Agenda 4, and that includes affordable housing, universal healthcare, and food security and manufacturing. And this is the core of and the things he wants to make sure that he's able to implement, and is able to make sure that it's done before he leaves office. Remember, he has just a few, maybe over just 2 years to have this done to Kenyans. So he's very keen on that, and a lot of the political rallies and his distractors, especially from his inner Jubilee party, have been seen as trying to take off the president's focus from the Big Four agenda. And he's been saying, no matter what you do, you're not going to distract me, because this is what I want done for Kenyans. Can we stop with the politicking for a minute? Can we just give Kenyans what we promised during the campaign period that led to the elections in 2017? So the president has been up and down trying to make sure that the Big Four agenda, he might not be able to accomplish it in its entirety, but at least a good percentage of it, he wants to make sure that he's able to leave a legacy, especially, and this would be the president's legacy once he leaves office. That is how he wants to be remembered, that he came and is actually to leave a mark in Kenya's life in terms of improving the economy, in terms of improving the housing conditions, in terms of improving the health sector. And we've seen when the President Uhuru Kenyatta came into office, there was introduction of free maternity services right now, because before then there was a huge number of mothers who could not access medical facilities when they were having children. But right now the maternal deaths have really decreased. So that is something that President Uhuru Kenyatta is being, praised for. So that now he wanted to extend to other, especially basic services when it comes to health here across the country, that everybody could benefit. Of course, as it is now, children under the age of 5 get free medical attention in all public, health facilities. But of course, there have been scandals upon scandals of medicine disappearing from public facilities. The major public hospitals across the country, but those are just some of the few problems he has to grapple with, and also the county government has to grapple with. But so far, the president is laying his commitment about implementing the Big Four agenda, and also the BBI, which is very important. As I said, it is the core of everything else, because unless the country has the stability, has the political stability, then nothing else can really take off. No person will come to invest in a country that is under turmoil. No investor would come to put their money where they feel it's not safe. So the political temperatures in a country informs other things and how our country develops. So that is very important. And the BBI is meant to just bring cohesion and just solve some of these acrimonies that has been plaguing the country within the different communities and other matters. So let's just see how that will go. So in the commitments, I remember we are still talking about President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. And of course, we all know the Big Four agenda, as I have mentioned. This is it. This is what he would like to be remembered for, that he was able to change the Kenyans' lives through these 4 main points. And in the commitments and way forward, and I'm reading from the Standard on page 7, you can grab your copy or you can just go online and check it out. But just a few points, commitments and way forward in regards to the implementation of the BBI agenda, which I just read there earlier. Ministers now have been ordered to help implement the BBI agenda, and this will be part of their, they'll be judged, or their performance will be assessed by how much they've contributing towards the implementation of the BBI in this working year, 2019-2020 financial year. So this is very important for them if they really want to keep their jobs. But, so the commitments and way forward, one is align policies and implement programs, projects and activities to the realization of the Big Four agenda. So the ministries are mandated to do that. And also continual fight against corruption, enhance judicial processes and capacity building to facilitate a dispensation of justice and adherence to the rule of law. That is the second thing, that the ministries that are charged with these different dockets and different responsibilities are supposed to make sure happens. And also continual public awareness creation, capacity building, enforcement and monitoring of national values and principle of governance. Yes, indeed. And also the fourth point, support the Building Bridges initiative by implementing interventions aimed at promoting national unity and nationhood, which is very, very important. And continual preparedness, collaborative ways to enhance public safety and security and the fight against terrorism. Also a very key point there. And then implement measures to support gender mainstreaming and youth empowerment, and also enhance collaboration between the two levels of government to entrench sharing and devolution power. And the last point is enhance the protection of the environment by securing riparian lands, water towers, improving the national forest cover, and other measures to facilitate sustainable development. So this is just the commitments and way forward, even as the CSS are tasked by the implementation of the BBI agenda. Now, Homa Bay Women Representative Gladys Wanga said that she supports the Kenya circular. That was a circular that was given to the cabinet secretaries by Mr. Kenya there. And she's saying that BBI is for the good of all Kenyans, and if Cabinet has been ordered to take cognizance of all the BBI 9-point agenda, then there is no problem. It is not political. There are things that affect Kenyans. If COFEC is against this, then it means it is against the fight against corruption, inclusivity, and shared prosperity. So that is according to Gladys Wanga, Homa Bay Women Representative. So in a nutshell, there it is. So President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy now, that is what he wants to be remembered now. And he's saying, you know what, if you was appointed as a cabinet secretary in this country, then now you are tasked to make sure that the BBI agenda must be implemented and the Big Four agenda must be implemented. And so this is very important and dear to the President of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta. And so let's just see how it will work out, and the legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, continues. And we go to our second topic on, before I get to the corruption in institutions and the interview that really exposed the rot in terms of embezzlement of funds at the Maara University in Narok County. See, just close to the story, I was just reading about the minister's order to implement the BBI is about witnesses opt out of Itumbi court cases, and a prosecution witness who was to testify against State House Digital Media Director Dennis Itumbi in a forgery case has withdrawn. Samuel Gateri Wanjiro filed an application claiming he was being forced to testify in the case where Mr. Itumbi was charged in relation to a letter alleging a plot to assassinate Deputy President William Ruto. He had been listed as the prosecutor's first witness alongside two police officers. And now, yesterday, Gateri, through lawyer Godiadis Majombo, told Milimani Chief Magistrate Martha Mutuku his life was in danger, and he cited an attempt to kidnap him. And after it was known, he was quitting the case. So the intrigues that happens when some of these high-profile cases are in our court. So now one of the witnesses there has withdrawn his case against Mr. Itumbi there. That is the State House Digital Media Director. You know, remember the letter that caused a lot of storm a few months ago here about the alleged plot by Mount Kenya. It was, they said, Mount Kenya leaders to assassinate the Deputy President William Ruto. And we've been waiting to hear the end of this story because those are very, very serious allegations. He is the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, and so the police took this matter with heaviness and the urgency that it required. And Mr. Dennis Itumbi was mentioned, and because the letter was forged apparently, and it was not very clear where it came from, but. So now there are witnesses who was supposed to come and testify against Mr. Itumbi, but as it has happened, one of the witnesses there, Samuel Gateri Wanjiro, has filed an application claiming he was being forced to testify in the case of Mr. Itumbi, and so he's now saying his life is in danger. And after he expressed that he wanted to bail out of the case, he's saying that he was becoming a target of even kidnappings, and he was afraid for his life. And so he has withdrawn his testimony against the Mr. Dennis Itumbi there. Bismarck Bura, hi. Good morning. How are you doing today? Okay, hope. Good morning from Biafra land. And I do have some news from Biafra land. There's some things I really want to hear your opinion about. And even as we write, remember the new spate of xenophobic attacks that are happening in South Africa from yesterday. Please let me know your thoughts in that. Like, we are in 2019. Why are we still fighting amongst each other? As if we don't have enough problems already that we should unite and fight against. I mean, seriously, this is very serious. So talk to me. And Mahdere Aldom, you're saying shame, shame on South Africans. They are missing their appetite. May God punish them with another serious appetite. Okay, that's a very serious prayer. My prayer is they just come back to their senses and realize these people that they are targeting, these Africans that they're killing and they're targeting and they're looting their properties, these are the people who stood by them during the times of apartheid. So that needs to be understood. Perhaps this younger generation from South Africa don't really understand what really took for South Africa to be free today, to be freed from apartheid. So for them to be hit with another apartheid, I don't know if that will be a good prayer. But that's how you feel this morning, Mahdere Andom. Thank you so much for writing. And here's Ken, you're saying, there is an ongoing deliberate attack by South Africans and their government on Nigerians living in South Africa. Hence, South Africa should be sanctioned. You know what? Perhaps. Yeah, I think maybe it's about time. I don't know. And Brian Ratem, you're saying South Africa should be withdrawn from African Union. And yes, there you go. Amber, no, Don, you're saying good morning, Passionate Africa. Let me just know your thoughts on the xenophobic attacks that has been happening in Africa, and of course other topics that we looked at this morning. The legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta. He has now ordered the ministers to implement the BBI agenda. Let me know your thoughts on that, and as they do that, of course, the Big Four agenda as well, and as I even prepare to bring you at the top of the hour the news making headlines across Africa. So there you go. Witnesses opt out of Dennis Itumbi's court case. And in other headlines, of course, it's a very sad story here. This is the Standard this morning, and family loss. They lost 6 members in Hell's Gate flash flood, and man loses wife and 5 other relatives as holiday to explore gorges turns into a nightmare. A very sad story there. This happened over the weekend, and flash floods killed 6 members of the same family. They were touring, a famous tourist site here called Hell's Gate National Park in Naivasha here in Kenya. So we're praying for that family that they could be consoled in this very difficult time. And also 1,000 cases risk collapse in evidence. Well, this is the headlines on the Standard, in the front page of the Standard. And it says that fight to stop investigators from secretly searching graft suspects' bank accounts and premises moves to the Supreme Court. Let me just get what that really says there so that we can understand fully. And it says more than 1,000 corruption cases could collapse following a court order outlawing secret search warrants during investigations. Prosecutors have told top judges. Like, seriously. Director of Public Prosecutions Nordin Haji and Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission EACC boss Twalib Mbarak yesterday challenged the Court of Appeal's verdict at the Supreme Court, arguing that it undermined the state's case 1,036 graft cases. They argue that the cases, some pending in courts and other awaiting DPP's approval for prosecution, stem from surprise access to bank accounts and searches in suspects' premises. The DPP and the EACC, in their separate appeals filed at the Supreme Court, argue that their efforts to tame runaway graft and crime will be dealt a huge blow if the order, which some suspects have already cited to press termination of charges against them. So there you go. The DPP's office and the DCI seem to be facing another hurdle from the courts in their quest to bring the corruption culprits to this country to account. And now the court might outlaw the secret search warrants during investigations. Like, how do you investigate? If you need to know how much this person has been looting from the public and the source of their unexplained wealth, I think looking at their bank accounts would be the most natural thing to do. So now there could be a ruling that might stop that from happening. So that will, I don't know what that will do, but I know it will curtail big time, the fight against corruption. When you're investigating, those are some of the things you're supposed to investigate, the bank accounts, I think. And so anyway, the DPP, Nordin Haji, and of course the EACC boss, Twalib Mbarak, have gone to court to challenge that ruling. So they're saying criminal investigation methods feature with wider scope and greater frequency, and the use of coercive powers of the state, such as summons, warrant, and even arrest, sometimes are required in that, so that you're able to get the evidence that you require. And I see the story here for Meru Senator Linturi. Lawyers put Kaitani to task on marriage. He kept saying he was never married to this lady, and this lady was able to produce, some evidence to show that he was actually married to Senator Linturi. I don't even like talking about this story. I find it quite embarrassing and quite private. I don't even know why the details of this are made public, or even the hearing is made public. I think this is a very private matter, and they should deal with it. So why some of these things out there in the public. I just don't know. But maybe let me just read what's happening here. And they're saying former Chief of Staff at the Deputy President's Office, Marian Keitany, was yesterday put to task to shed more light on the allegations. She was married to Meru Senator Mithika Linturi and that he stole from her family. During cross-examination by Linturi's lawyer, Muthoni Thiankolu, Keitany was asked why there were many inconsistencies on the dates of the alleged marriage ceremony. And in her documents that were later amended, she had indicated that she was married on April 16, 2016, but an error, and the ceremony was held on March 26, 2016. So apparently, she had indicated that she was married on April 16th, 2016. They were married, I think it was a traditional marriage, but later on she corrected that and said she was married March 26th. Like, who forgets their marriage? Like, who forgets their wedding date? Whatever it is, traditional or this other one, or even just walking to an AG's office and signing the marriage certificate. Can you forget that date, especially us ladies? So apparently she forgot. She gave a different date and later on came to correct. This is ridiculous. So in her documents that were later amended, she had indicated, of course, she was married on April 26th, and then it continues to say, I have filed an affidavit in court indicating that our marriage with Linturi was held in Nandi on March 26th, 2016, said Keitany. And Keitany, through her lawyer, Danstan Omari, had objected to cross-examination based on documents she had filed in other courts. If you had filed documents in courts, these are part of the evidence, and you do not want to be used, you do not want that to be used to cross-examine you and just to double-check the information that you've given and to be examined in that. Does not make sense. So she did not want to be examined or cross-checked in regards to the documents through her lawyer that they had filed earlier, I think, that had all these inconsistencies in terms of the dates and all that. And now this is going to be one long case. So we'll just keep you updated, or not very much, because I strongly believe that that is a very private matter, and they should be able to just deal with it outside of the public glare. That is just my opinion. And of course, there's some news. Mariga in race for Kibra seat after Jubilee's interviews, and I think I have that, and I'll read it during the African news headlines. And that is just what is happening in the Standard this morning. And we see on the Star newspaper, Mau members of parliament tell Uhuru to give evictees land. Now, this Mau land is becoming murky by every passing day, and this is also a problem that might not seem to go away very, very soon. And a section that is, according to the Star newspaper on page 4 and 5, a section of Rift Valley leaders wants evictees from the Mau forest resettled in the Kenyatta family land. The members of parliament, mostly allied to Deputy President William Ruto, also warned that the looming eviction could be the last straw in the Jubilee political marriage. In a fresh twist on the plans to flush out illegal settlers in the 46,000-acre forest complex, the MPs asked President Uhuru Kenyatta to lead from the front and offer an alternative settlement. The MPs told the Star that it would be unfair to evict genuine landowners with the title deeds while one family is sitting on huge tracts of land. All right, now it has come to that. I don't know if you're a Kenyan and you understand what they're saying. Please let me know your thoughts on this. So one MP is quoted to say, let the president donate some land to the Mau evictees. We saw his family donate some land in Taita Taveta. We will fight for our family until justice is seen to be done. So a member of parliament, Caleb Kositany, the chairman of the Rift Valley members, MPs, said in 2016, President Uhuru Kenyatta's family voluntarily gave 2,000 acres of land in Taita Taveta County to settle squatters. Coming a year to the 2017 general elections, the move was seen as a scheme to appease residents who had for many years complained of historical land injustices. And the historical land injustices, I think, is a very major problem in central province and also in Rift Valley. And there you go. I don't know how the president will, handle that. And John Paul, you're saying, as lazy as South Africans, even their women are not ashamed to publicly involved in stealing. This is sacrilegious. Oh, wow. A bit harsh there, but John Paul, I would understand where your sentiments are coming from. And Abdi Samad Ali, you're saying, hello, ICJ judge will not be changed, plus Kenya say they don't respect nor recognize white man's law. And Abdi Samad Ali, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And Dr. Matsanga is not here with me, but he is at The Hague. And we will have a special coverage from there about the same matter, the row between Kenya and Somalia. And he's, I think, he'll give us the details at 3 p.m. So hopefully you can join us then. Paul Nyang, you're saying you're watching us from Australia. Good evening to you and thank you for joining. So Abdi Samad, I will not push that conversation because I would want us to talk about it at 3 p.m. Dr. Matsanga traveled all the way to The Hague, the International Court of Justice, and he'll be joining us at 3 p.m. via the Skype, and he will tell us the latest and why he's there and what he intends to achieve and why he thought it was important for him to travel all the way. So I will not let the cat out of the bag yet, and I will not spill the beans. So let's just be patient. It's just a few hours. 3 p.m. and then we can have that conversation. But thank you so much, Abdi Samad. I appreciate this morning. Oge Friday, you're saying the killings and destruction of Igbo-speaking Biafrans in South Africa is unacceptable. And BR Garang, you're saying, Miriam, the problem of Mao needs leaders of Kenya to solve. I think it does. And I think that apparently was the source of the acrimony between the now Vice President, Mr. Dr. William Ruto and then his party leader Raila Odinga. That is why they fell out and he left ODM. I don't know if that was just a scapegoat Ruto was using, because now he is in power. He is the vice president of the country, and those are perceived to be his people. Why has he not yet found a solution to the Mao forest? And what is it? This is a problem that is very intricate and should be handled very, very carefully. And politics should just be put aside, and these people needs to be taken care of. And if they're evicted from the Mao forest, they should be allowed, either given compensation and shown where to go and look for another land, because a lot of these people, this is the only home they know. So when you're uprooting them from their ancestral homes and land, it's something else. So there should be, I think, a way in which it's done that the people don't suffer so much. Remember, yesterday I was reading here in the news headlines, and the members of parliament from the affected areas had come out and said the children should resume back as the third term of the Kenya, educational year has started. It started yesterday. The schools in public schools opened yesterday. And so they urged the students to go back to the schools. Remember, the schools was closed. And in that area, there are 15 as government schools, and they were all closed down. And the government warned that they will not be open. And so, but the members of parliament from that area came out and said, you know what, you go back to school, the schools will be open. So it has taken a very dangerous political turn, and that might not have this problem solved. And the people will continue to suffer, the people from Mao. Politics aside, there needs to be a permanent solution. And the people who will be evicted from Mao should not suffer. I think there should be a humane way of relocating them elsewhere, and just making sure that they are okay. And from Arlington, Texas, that is Brian Ratemo, you're saying, BBI is a failed initiative. Uhuru Okot represents what common Mananchi feels, where was building initiative 2007, 2012, 2017. So this quest for legacies, we should remind Mr. President, legacy is not leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. Okay, so leaving something in people. Like what? Like peace? I don't know, because the BBI is meant to to bring that cohesion. That will be embedded, in people's hearts and in people, but also you would agree with me that a lot needs to be done in terms of these are the things that they are suggesting. So I think Mr. President Uhuru Kenyatta is just keen on the tangibles, making sure that, years later you can point and say, you know what, that road was built when Uhuru Kenyatta was the president, or this and this was done. So he's just keen on just doing things that Kenyans will remember him positively. Remember, his presidency has not been a smooth ride, from fighting for his case in the ICC to now the acrimony, the Jubilee Party, he has a lot on his plate. So he just, before he leaves for the next few years that are still remaining, he wants to make sure that he leaves Kenyans better than he found them. That is what he says, and that is what Agenda 4 seems to focus on, and that is what the BBI seems to focus on. But Brian Rotemo, thank you so much for your sentiments. Punguza Mizigo, which has been fiercely attacked by some section of politicians in this country, and even others telling him not to go to the counties and present the Punguza Mzigo initiative. And others have also said that this is a sponsored move to counter the BBI initiative. So politics again at play here, but thank you so much, Brian Rotemo, for that. So maybe I should just, as I'll come back to this much later, the other newspapers, that is the Mau, as I've read there earlier, members of parliament tell Uhuru Kenyatta to give evictees their land. Ratem, I don't know what you'll make of that. They're saying President Uhuru Kenyatta's family owns a huge chunk of land in this country, and the people who are being evicted from the Mau forest, the president's family should donate some land to them. This has taken a completely different turn, and I think they're just taking away from the main issue here. But I don't know what will be your thoughts on that, Brian Rotema. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. And the battle to save Mau water tower begins. That is the headlines on the Daily Nation, and I will come to that much later. But now I think that perhaps I should look quickly on our other topic that we had on corruption in institutions, with a special focus on Maara University. Remember, over the weekend on Sundays, there was an expose on Citizen TV on the looting of public coffers at the institution. Paid, and they're told that there's no money, and this has affected the university's operations to a very great extent. And this is very serious, and I think that the police, the DCI, all the EACC, everybody involved and who has the responsibility to fight corruption in this country should rain on this university already. If they haven't, they should already be at the Maara University and try to really find out what's really happening there, because students are paying. There's another also a public university that has been engulfed. It's one of the major public universities here in Kenya, and you find that you do your exams, you don't get the results. I don't know what happens because the lecturers have not been paid. So you get to suffer as a student, and you've paid your money, especially the students who the part-time students who pay a lot of money for their education there, and you don't get the value for your money, or you don't even get the results of your exams. That is quite unfair. And so I think that the government and the agencies are, tasked with fighting corruption, especially the DCI, because this is a criminal matter, should completely reign by now at Maara University and really see what's really happening. So the university has misappropriated 190 million Kenya shillings. That is not misappropriation, that is a theft, according to the expose. And you see that the driver to the VC is a conduit to this case, and is the one who's being used. He's the one who's running the show in the VC's office. I would like to know the relationship between the VC, Mary Walingos, Professor Mary Waringo, and the driver, Mr. Hassan Noor. There seems to be more than just meet the eye. Hassan Noor seems to be the person running the show in Chancellor Professor Mary Walingos' office. That is the Vice Chancellor of Maara University Heights. It's such a shame, and I don't know, maybe that's why Mr. Professor Magoha is trying to get rid of this many universities and campuses we're having across the country, because it's very difficult, even to, especially these public ones, to manage and to oversee what's really happening. And now there has been runaway corruption, and you can see an institution like the Maara University. Now look at what is really happening there. It's such a shame. Keep writing to me and let me know your thoughts on this. And Bismarck, who is this? You're saying, Bismarck Bora is saying, unfortunately, some black Africans politicians don't care about the welfare of citizens after being elected. Mao case is a serious matter. It should be treated as a security matter because without land, people are hopeless. True. Morning, Dr. Max Ruti. So thank you so much for joining. Doctor is not present here today, but I am. Dr. Matanga is at the ICJ court. There he's filed their case. Remember the case that involves Kenya and Somalia maritime realm. And I'll be speaking to him via Skype at 3 p.m. East African time. So I hope that you can join us then. But right now, I've been running the show here from yesterday, I think from Friday. Don't worry, you're in safe hands. But right now, we were just looking at what's making headlines in Kenya this morning. But now let's just go straight to what's making headlines across Africa. And we start with this very unfortunate matter and the events that are developing there from South Africa. And police in South Africa have been overwhelmed by looters in the latest round of xenophobic attacks by residents of Jamestown, an area close to commercial hub Johannesburg. Multiple local media outlets said rampant looting of shops and torching of buildings have been registered in the riots. The portals and the looters have targeted businesses of foreigners. Elsewhere, rioters have blocked roads and burnt tires, obstructing movement of persons and vehicles. The police was caught in running battles with them across parts of Johannesburg for the better part of yesterday. Very, very unfortunate events there, and we'll talk about it. Let me just read through the rest of the news-making headlines in other nations here in Africa, and then we'll come back and talk about that. It's really disgusting. I mean, it's appalling to say the least. And in the DRC, the head of Democratic Republic of Congo's public finances watchdog was detained for questioning for several hours on Saturday in what he said was retaliation for investigations by his police into spending by senior government officials. Sylvain Kasongo, the capital's Kinshasa police chief, confirmed to Reuters that Inspector General of Finances Victor Batubenge and one of his colleagues had been detained for several hours before being released. And we go to Burkina Faso, where two generals who were accused of plotting Burkina Faso's 2015 failed coup have been found guilty and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. General Gilbert Diendere and Jibril Basole were handed the sentences on Monday by the military court of Ouagadougou. And Diendere, a former right-hand man of former President Burkinabe President Blaise Compaoré, was convicted for an attack on state security and murder. We go to Namibia, where Germany's development minister Gerd Müller said his country committed genocide in Namibia, referring to the slaughter of Herero and Nama tribes people more than a century ago. Müller joins a growing list of senior government members to use the genocide term, even as compensation claims are under discussion. Now, German soldiers slaughtered 665,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama members in a 1904-1905 campaign after a revolt against land seizures by colonists in what historians and the United Nations have long called the first genocide of the 20th century. And we go to Namibia, where Zambian Member of Parliament Margaret Mhango Mwanakatwe over the weekend officially commissioned a toilet facility in the capital, Lusaka, eliciting social media reactions. Mwanakatwe is a Member of Parliament for Lusaka Central on the ticket for the ruling Patriotic Front, PF. She commissioned a public toilet the commissioned public toilets were in Malata and Bauleni compounds. The local Mwebantu portal reported, like seriously, a whole Member of Parliament. I saw those photos. I didn't know whether to laugh or just be sad. She went to commission toilets in the city. Like, what? Okay. Rwanda. We go to Rwanda. Where on the day of the academic year, hundreds of Rwandese students have been stopped from crossing the border into Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo over the fear of Ebola spreading. Many pupils opt to study in French-speaking Goma because the tuition fees are more reasonable there. Schools and colleges were on holiday when Rwanda's health minister warned students to enroll in Rwanda, where English is the main language of tuition. And we go to Nigeria, where the United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings condemned rising violence across Nigeria and lack of accountability for perpetrators. Agnes Galamad, speaking at a news conference on Monday in Nigeria's capital, said the country needed urgent action to end the pressure cooker of violence that has claimed thousands of lives. Nigeria is currently facing multiple conflicts, from attacks by the armed group Boko Haram to fighting between nomadic herders and farmers. And we cannot forget the war that is going on against the Biafrans there in Nigeria. We go to Tunisia, and campaigning began in Tunisia on Monday for September 15th presidential elections, seen as vital to defending democratic gains made after the Arab Spring Revolution. And the vote, the second of its kind since 2011 overthrow of the long-term ruler Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, was brought forward from November following the death of President Beji Said Essebsi in July. Now, the election will see the participation of some of the country's biggest names in Tunisian politics. And in Kenya, former Inter Milan midfielder McDonald Mariga has been cleared to run in the upcoming Kibera constituency parliamentary by-election in Kenya's capital in Nairobi. The constituency is known for including Kibera, the East African nation's largest slum. Mariga won nomination as a Jubilee Party candidate, the party of President Uhuru Kenyatta, after a face-to-face interview with party officials on Monday. He is East Africa's most decorated footballer, courtesy of the UEFA Champions League, Italia's Serie A, and Coppa Italia titles that he won at Inter Milan under coach Jose Mourinho in 2010. He later, of course, struggled to attract interest from major clubs because of his injuries. His last professional stint was at Spanish second division side Real Oviedo in 2017. All right, from the football pitch to the political murky waters of politics, especially here in Kenya, let's wish McDonald Mariga all the best. And in South Sudan, arrangements are underway to convene a meeting between Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar in Juba, the SPLM-IO has confirmed to iRadio. The IGAD has wanted the principals to hold a meeting in Addis to discuss the pending task of the extended pre-transitional period, but last month, the office of the president said President Kiir had no plans to meet opposition leader Dr. Machar outside Juba. Dr. Machar, on the other side, insisted on meeting Kiir in Addis Ababa for his own personal security concerns. However, Agok Makur, member of the political bureau of SPLM-IO, told iRadio on Monday that the new Sudanese government is arranging the meeting, which will take place in Juba, and the Sudan's new prime minister will supervise the meeting, where he has promised to come with Dr. Riek Machar. And we go to Cameroon, where the official start of this year in Cameroon has been disturbed in the English-speaking northwest and southwest regions. Authorities have said they told the BBC that suspected Anglophones were trying to scare students and teachers from attending classes in the two regions that have been driven by conflict since 2016. Gunfire rocked the northwest city of Bamenda, they said. Education officials say that in most areas, students and pupils remained indoors fearing for their lives. Now, the Anglophones who want to create a state called Ambazonia has ordered a lockdown in the regions following life sentences handed down to the leaders by a military court 2 weeks ago. Agitation for independence started in 2016 following complaints of discrimination by the Francophone majority, and residents also said they were being forced to use French in schools and in the courts. So the problems in Ambazonia there continue. And okay, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but children from the Anglophone region in Cameroon have not been to school for now nearly 4 years. Can you believe that? Just process that in a moment and then pause and see how that will affect this region in the coming years. And the students in the larger Francophone region have been continuing with their education. And it is said that some fighters from the Anglophone region are the ones who are making education impossible. And one of the reasons they're saying is because they're being forced to teach through French, and they can't really speak French because it's an Anglophone region. They speak English, and so the students from the Anglophone region have not been going to school. And the other side, kids are going to school and life goes there as usual. This generation that is being denied an opportunity to go to school at this point, the last nearly 4 years, what are we doing in this region? How will this affect even the dynamics of the Anglophone region? The schools are closed for a very long time now. Kids are just at home, and others are now still living in the forest because it's not even safe to live at home. The next thing you know, the villages are being banned. Our hospitals have been run down. Basically, the region in Anglophone, nothing much is really happening because there has been for the last couple of years, from 2016, running battles between the military of from Yaoundé, led by President Paul Biya, and the leaders in Anglophone. And the last 2 weeks, of course, the Anglophone leaders of the Ambazonian leaders were handed over a life sentence, and that was 10 of them. Ayuk Tabe, I believe, and among 9 others were handed a life sentence over the agitation for secession because that apparently, attracts such a penalty. And the case, their lawyers, I think, went to appeal, and let's see how that will go on. But I'm just pausing for a moment and just trying to imagine in the next 10 or 20 years, these children that has been denied an opportunity to go to school. Well, what will their future look like? What will that mean to the Anglophone, region in terms of development and opportunities? Because school is a very vital thing in any country or in any area. So when that is denied to children, that should send alarms across the board. And I don't know why United Nations is not putting enough pressure on Paul Biya and just find a common ground. Let the Ambazonians be taught in English. Like, what is the big deal? You cannot insist on a language and impose on something that people have no interest of learning, do not want to learn, and you want it to be taught in the schools. They don't want it. What is the problem? When you go to a country like Canada, like a place like Quebec, majority of it is just French. Canada, they speak both English and French, and there are towns and cities where it's just French, but they're able to work very well. Why would that not be the case in Cameroon? Why do you have to insist on it has to be French and French and French? While French is a very lovely language, but come on. There has to be a middle ground, because these headlining positions will cost the people from Ambazonia in the years to come. They'll be lagging behind in terms of the levels of even engaging with the rest of the world. Unless you're lucky to get out of that place and maybe get an education out elsewhere in the world, which I believe majority of the population from the Amazonia may not even be able to afford. But this is a great injustice that is being meted, especially to the children from the Amazonian region. And I think it is time that these international bodies, United Nations Education Fund, United Nations Children something, they should come in and try and rescue this situation. Two languages, they can coexist, surely. Like I mentioned, countries like Canada, they're able to live very well. Go to the rest of Canada, Ontario, you'll speak your English and that's fine. But when you go to some other parts, they speak French and it's okay. And people are able to learn that language and they're able to interact. And when you go, they have double signs in English and in French in some important public spaces. So you're able to just get along just fine. So what can that be? Why the insistence of French speaking in schools, in French, in courts, even courts in Ambazonia? You want to try people in a language that they cannot even understand. Like, what is that? I think this hardlining positions is what will not only bring Cameroon to its knees, and finally it will affect Ambazonians very much, but also this is a problem with the rest of Africa. It's my way or no way at all. And that sort of totalitarian, ruling across Africa it's ridiculous. And somebody needs to speak up about this great injustice. I'm just worried about this generation that is being denied, an opportunity to go and get an education. And what will that mean in long term, in terms of development in the Ambazonia regions? They'll need professionals to run the economy should their cause for secession succeed. They will need people who from there that have the capacity and skills to do it, that are educated enough to do it. So when they're denied this opportunity to go out there and better themselves, that should concern anybody with a sound mind across the world. That is a very grave concern that should attract, the attention of the world. It's very unfair. As a mother, I'm a mother, so I can imagine a situation where my child cannot go to school because of whatever reason, unless they're sick. But if they're not, then they should be able to access. If they cannot afford the good private education, but they should be able to afford a good public education and go there and get the knowledge that they require. And so this is very personal to me, and I believe this is a very great injustice. Nearly 4 years, the children from Ambazonia have not been able to go to school. That is madness. And that is something that should make the world stop and see what kind of generation are we raising. What quality of people will be there in Ambazonia in the next few years. That is very, very unfair, and I think it's time that the world paid very keen attention to what is happening there in Ambazonia. Very sad news there from Cameroon. Schools have not been able to open since 2016. Yes. All schools from the Anglophone region, while the rest of Cameroon, from the Francophone regions, they're actually able to go to schools and their lives are not affected. The imbalance itself, it's a great injustice, and I'm just appalled. That is something that the UN especially, and the UN bodies that are involved in advocating for children's rights, because this is a rights abuse to the children in the Anglophone region, and somebody needs to speak out and say this should not be allowed to continue. Let these people be taught by the language they understand and they want to speak. You can't force people. You can't force people to speak a language they don't want. And it's okay to coexist speaking in different languages. It's not a criminal offense. Somebody needs to speak out on behalf of the children in Ambazonia. It is not right. It is not right. And this will affect greatly the Anglophone region in Cameroon, and it will not be a very good. They'll lag behind in everything, because education is key. If you want a country to develop, in Kenya here, there were some communities who were lagging behind in terms of even developmental matters, because according to them, girls are not supposed to go to school and blah, 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 and kids, education was not very important. So when you look at such communities here in Kenya, you'll see that they're very behind in terms of even comprehending and being in line with the moving world today. And the government has made an effort in making sure that education is prioritized, and very stringent measures has been taken care of. If a child in your village, if you're a chief at a certain village and there's a child there that is of school-going age and they're not going to school, you are answerable, because you're supposed to go there and find out why they're not going to school. So governments took a very strong stand, because they realized for these areas to develop, for there be an understanding between these communities and the rest of the communities in the country, there has to be a level of understanding and be able to comprehend matters. And this can only happen when people get educated. So education is something that is very, very important. And in 2019, the 21st century, I cannot overemphasize. So this has to stop. This madness has to stop. Children must be allowed to go to school. They must be allowed to be taught in a language that they understand, period. When you go to the Kenyan villages, of course, our national language is Kiswahili, and then we are taught English in schools. But when I go to my village, kids in the lower primary, the ECD, you'll find that they're being taught with the mother tongue, because that is the language they're able to understand, and then later on they can come to the national language, but the teacher is able to communicate to them at the level at which they understand, and the language in which they're able to comprehend better, and then later on they're able to speak Kiswahili or English. So it is a shame. It is a shame, and it is a shame, and it is a shame. And I'm appalled by this. I think that this should attract the attention of the international communities. If it hasn't, it has not. I don't understand what is, because this is a crisis, and this is a looming crisis that awaits that region in Cameroon, and it's a shame. One of the viewers there, you're saying, yes, it is a shame. It is a shame. Those kids there should be an environment that allows them to go to school. Those children in Ambazonia should be allowed to go to school. 4 years, a child has not gone to school. A child of school-going age has never stepped a foot in school. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Knowledge is power, and they need to be educated so that they're able to compete in a level playing field with the rest of the world, especially. And if that region is to develop, we need those children to go to school. And somebody out there who is listening and who they should pay attention to this, and something needs to be done, and an enabling environment needs to be created for the Anglophone children there in Ambazonia. So that is worrying. Now let's just go back to this madness that is happening in South Africa. Like, who bewitched Africans? How has South Africans learned anything? You know, there was this xenophobic attack that happened earlier in the year, and maybe they got away. Is it because South African government is lenient in terms of, even holding the perpetrators to account? What is it that is happening in South Africa that keeps encouraging the xenophobic attacks against their fellow Africans? Is it because nobody is holding them to accountable? Or is it because the laws there are quite lenient? What is it that is happening in South Africa? I don't know what your opinion is. Is it afternoon already? I think, it is afternoon. So I don't know, what is your opinion in what is happening in South Africa? It is crazy. It is very shameful. As an African, and knowing how much other African nations were there for South Africa while they were fighting the oppressive regime of apartheid, and now that hate and that what that they were meted on is what they're giving to their fellow Africans. What a shame. And South Africa being one of the most popular countries here in Africa. You cannot talk about Africa without mentioning South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, throw in Kenya in there. These are one of the countries that, are top in the African map. And now it's a shame what is happening over there. You'd rather have foreigners of a different race and be comfortable than have your fellow African. People who felt your pain, people who fought on your behalf, people who made sure that you were liberated. Because a lot of South Africans are freedom fighters and apartheid fighters. They sought for asylum in different African countries, and all countries in Africa, majority of them, played a very pivotal role in terms of making sure that South Africa became free, and was led by, which led to the end of the apartheid in there. So this morning, I'm a very disappointed African. I can't even tell you enough how that is. It's very, very disappointing. I don't know what has become of us, and I want to believe, that they can get some sense, but it happened, and I'm sure there are chances of it happening again. So just some of the reasons why that is sending some of these South Africans, especially I think the younger, when you see the photos there, the images that are coming from Jamestown there, a place that is close to a South African's commercial hub there in Johannesburg. You see there are a lot of younger men and women. It was a shame. You also see even ladies going in shops and looting, very young men and women. You're thinking, are they not aware of their history and how the rest of Africa was there for South Africa? Or it's just ignorance? Or it's just stupidity? Like, what is the problem from South Africans? They're saying the foreigners are coming in to take the opportunities that are there for them. Of course, there has been a lot of inequalities. Like I was just talking about Ambazonia, what is happening right now in Ambazonia. The children in Ambazonia have been denied the opportunity to go and get education. Now, that is what used to happen in apartheid South Africa. The black South Africans were not allowed to get the best opportunities in the countries. And so this made the other races be ahead in terms of education and professionalism and education and opportunities in South Africa. So the black South African is just catching up, playing a catch-up game right now to make sure they are at par, because there were years of neglect and towards them, and the institutions they were not allowed to have those opportunities. They were marginalized. They were marginalized in their own country. What is happening now in the Anglophone? They were marginalized. The South Africans, the black South Africans, were marginalized in their own countries, and there were years of institutional marginalization And we saw that they're still lagging behind. But that was until 1994, where that was the end of apartheid, and they had the first black president. Until when are they going to use this as an excuse as to, okay, so now we don't have opportunities because we have these Biafrans from Nigeria, or we have these Anglophones from Cameroon, or we have these Africans from Somalia who are coming here and have great entrepreneurship opportunities, and they see them an opportunity and they seize the moment and they contribute into South Africa's economy, create even jobs, and you're just there. The opportunities were there, but you never bothered to make an effort. These people come in the country because a lot of them are even refugees running away from wars in their countries. Biafrans, they're running away from prosecution in their own country. They come into South Africa, but they're willing to take the risk and to work hard and to get what they have today. And you are here. The viewers here are saying they can only say South Africans are lazy. And a lot of our viewers, that is what they're alluding to. You can imagine you just sleep and then come in and take something that somebody has worked so hard to achieve. What level of madness is that? What kind of Africa are we building? What will be the future of the generations coming after this? It's a shame. It's a shame. And South Africa leadership should be ashamed that they've not been able to. Now they're even killing themselves. They can't even stand each other, surely. That is not right. We cannot do that to our fellow Africans. And when you go to all African countries, you'll find other nationalities from within the member states in Africa that are working there, are doing businesses there, or are married there, or, we coexist. In Kenya, we have everybody here. When you go to Uganda, I'm sure you have everybody there. I know maybe a few countries you cannot really go there and thrive, like Eritrea and whatnot. But majority of African nations, you can go there and go on about your business, and nobody will bother you. And, as long as you're doing your businesses there, or you're working, and you have the right paperwork and everything that allows you to exist in that country, nobody should stop you from doing that. South Africans, come on, let's just stop it. This is wrong in all levels, like in all levels of decency, or even it's just the basic level of human decency. This is just wrong, and nothing can really justify this level of madness and this level of nonsense. Like I said, you cannot try to make sense out of this. Is just wrong. And our prayers, amen. You're saying Amazonians have been marginalized for 57 years now. And John Clark, thank you for joining. You're saying for South Africa, all continent of Africa should close the embassies of South Africa. Yeah, I think now the rest of Africa states, especially whose citizens have been affected, but just in unity with the people who have been affected, our fellow Africans. I think that the rest of African states should come out and really take a very strong stand, and perhaps closing the embassies for a period of time in protest in that, and in standing with the people who have been affected. That could be a very great move, and that would show the South African government that the rest of Africa is not happy with that craziness. Look at that. People looting from shops. They burned shops. Look at that lady. What a shame. Look at that. People's cars being burned. Somebody worked all of their lives. Look at that. It's such a shame. I can't even, we apologize for the night. I think you're having a problem with but we are on and off. But thank you for your patience. This is unacceptable. This is truly unacceptable, and it's appalling. Look at that. You just wake up one morning. I think there are a tweet by Geoffrey Onyema, you're saying, received sickening and depressing news of continued burning and looting of Nigerian shops and premises in South Africa by mindless criminals with ineffective police protection. Enough is enough. We will take definitive actions. And I think a lot of our viewers there were saying the Biafran's shops were being looted. Biafran's shops were being targeted. There you go. It's terrible there. So let me just read some news from Biafra. I don't know if I read it earlier. But the Biafra Zionist Federation, BZF, weekend warned that it will no longer condone what it called the clampdown on its people by agencies of the Nigerian government. This is also as it faulted the recent strategy adopted by the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB. A leader of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, had mobilized his group to Japan, where President Buhari attended an event alongside other world leaders vowing to disgrace the Nigerian president. However, in a statement released by self-acclaimed president of the BZIF, that is the Biafra Zionist Federation, Benjamin Onwoka, he said with Kanu's approach, the international community would soon see Biafra agitators as terrorists. Onwoka, who said diplomacy with international world powers, especially the United States of America, remained key to the Biafran struggle, said it was childish for everyone to dream of arresting President Buhari in Japan. So there you go, some breaking news there from Biafra. I don't know what your opinion will be. Remember, over the last week, of course, the leaders of Africa had attended the TICAD conference in Japan, and there was some news that Biafrans had gone there to the venue of the conference, and they were bailing for President Buhari's blood, and they're saying they'll even go and stop the plane of the president from returning to Nigeria. But now the leader of Biafra Zionist Federation is raising very pertinent matters here. He's saying if the Biafrans should realize the dream of becoming an independent nation, that they should stay away from such moves. They're saying that what Nnamdi Kanu had said, and I want to know your thoughts on this, the Biafrans here watching today. I don't know what you'll make of this. And he said that by Nnamdi Kanu saying that Biafrans will go there and stop President Buhari plane from taking off and going back to Nigeria, that was very uncalled for, and he goes ahead to raise a very pertinent matter here, and I think I would like to know your thoughts on this. He says, however, he's saying that the approach will make the international community to view Biafran agitators as terrorists. That move that Kanu wanted the Biafrans to do, to go and make sure the plane does not take off for President Buhari, or to just agitate their rights in Japan and have a blockade towards him, accessing even his hotel or coming out of his hotel or at the conference center, attacking him there. He's saying such things will make Biafrans lose the love and the support they have from other international communities. So it was a cautionary tale there. So as much as you want to go and raise awareness about the matters in regards to Biafra, then also you have to find proper channels to agitate for that and to make sure that you're not causing problems with the other international support that you have across board. And so he continued to say that the group of clergy led by Father Belai that is a news from Ethiopia. He says that diplomacy with international world powers, especially the United States of America, remained key to the Biafra struggle, and said it was childish for anyone to dream of arresting President Buhari in Japan. I don't know what will be your opinion on that. Is the leader for Biafra Zionist Federation right in this regard? Was that a very extreme advice from the IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu when he was asking Biafrans to go and stop President Buhari's plane from a takeoff? And I said here, was it on Tuesday or when was it? I said it's not even possible for you to access ahead of a state's private jet in an airport anywhere in the world. Like, you cannot, because it is under a very serious security. And so that was it far-fetched? Was it an idea that was not well thought of? And if we were to base our argument in what this person is saying here, the leader for Biafran Zionist Federation, will this curtail the efforts of helping Biafra achieve its independence? Moves like that, will they be counterproductive? Is that what Biafrans needs at this in this stage of their struggle towards realizing an independent state. Was it wise for Nnamdi Kanu to even make such pronouncements? And what would have been the better option in terms of if he wanted to have the supporters and the people from Biafra to go there and just raise awareness? What would have been the right way to do it? I don't know. Just let me know. But I think this was perhaps a bit extreme, and I think I said it here. I said that might not work very well in favor of Biafrans, because Japan has a responsibility to make sure every head of state that was attending the TICAD conference was very much well given the security they required. And so that would have been a very tall order for Biafrans to actually even approach President Buhari's private jet. But did Nnamdi Kanu even mean for Biafrans to go do this? Because he had tweeted and said, you know what, today the president, he will not be able to access his jet. We'll go and make sure it does not take off. We'll go and condone the conference area. We'll make sure we get a hold of him. I saw a part of that, and it appears it was not received well by Biafra Zionist Federation, who was saying such things. Well, if they were to try that in Japan, then they will be seen as terrorists. That is according to the Biafra Zionist Federation leader there over the weekend. He said that Mr. Benjamin Onwoka, he's the self-proclaimed president of the Biafran Zionist Federation there. I don't know if whatever he's saying has a point. People from Biafra, I would like to know your thoughts on that. Was he right in cautioning Mr. Nnamdi Kanu against such extreme measures? And this will just pity him against the international community that seems to be in favor of Biafra. And should he continue with such pronouncements, what will that mean in terms of gaining their support? Because I don't see how United States would support such a move. And so even this person here is pointing out that that will be counterproductive. Please, I want to know your thoughts on that so that we continue having this conversation, and maybe we can have it as an independent conversation later on. So it's just a few minutes, about 19 minutes towards the end of the show today. And let's just look at Ethiopia. And the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia has urged the federal government to prevent a breakaway by a group of its clergy in the populous Oromia region, the private reporter newspaper has reported. The group seeking to break away, led by Belai Makonnen, is unhappy that the Orthodox Church conducts its services in Amharic, Ethiopia's official working language. Look at that. So now the group of clergy, led by Father Belai, wants church masses to be held in Afan Oromo, which is spoken by the Oromo communities, and the Oromo communities happens to be the largest ethnic group there in Ethiopia. Now the majority of Ethiopia's population of more than 100 million people belong to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian denominations in the world. We brought ethnicity in church, not just in politics like in Kenya here. The politicians use that to divide the people. So the Kenyans who are naive enough takes the bait and believes, you know what, as long as this person is not from my community, then they might not be they might not mean well for me. And so we fight against ethnical linings here in Kenya, especially during electioneering periods. And now I see Ethiopia now, ethnicity has been brought to church, and the Orthodox Church, the oldest denominations in the world, and that is the predominant church in Ethiopia, is now being split into two, because they're saying, the Oromo community is saying, you know what, no, we are not happy that since the beginning of Ethiopia as a country, the Orthodox Church has been conducting in services in Amharic, and that is the official language in Ethiopia. So now they just realized we no longer want to speak this language. We want to adopt our own indigenous language, which I see happening. You find like a church like Anglican Church of Kenya or the SDA Church is across all villages and counties in Kenya. But when you go down to the villages, you'll find that they will conduct their services in the indigenous language, because that is what the people understand, right? But on a much bigger platform, they'll probably use English or Swahili, the national language, languages that people from different ethnical backgrounds will understand. But when you go down to the villages, the services they are conducted in the native language. But that has not advised a need for now Anglicans, say, from the central province or from the central counties of Kenya, say, you know what, because now it's these people are conducting the services from this language. Now we want to break away and form our own church and just conduct it in our own ethnic language. I think that is very dangerous. Presidents there in Ethiopia, that is very, very dangerous. And man, maybe we need some time to speak about Ethiopia and what is really happening. And after, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who is now over just a year in office, he celebrated his first anniversary in April, and now what some of the changes that he brought, he was trying to introduce a few reforms in the countries that was seen not to be existing during the other leadership of other prime ministers there in Ethiopia. But his leadership also is over 1 year in power, has really been marked with a lot of things that has been happening. And we're seeing now there is a referendum scheduled for the Sidema region. They want to be autonomous, and that was scheduled for November. There are a lot of things that are happening in Ethiopia. So I don't know, some of these reforms that Abiy Ahmed introduced, are they working towards bringing Ethiopians together and cohesion and really spearhead nationwide development, or they're actually working against what he would have wanted to achieve? So perhaps this is a conversation that we need to have independent, like on its own, in a whole show, because I think that there's a lot of things happening in Ethiopia that requires the world's attention. But there it is. The Orthodox Church now is taking a very, ethnical route there, and they're saying, you know what, the Amharic, that is the national language that has been being used in conducting the services in Orthodox Church, which is the predominant church there in Ethiopia. We no longer want that. And now, in Afan Oromo, they want to speak the Afan Oromo, and that is the Oromo community. They want to speak to be conducting masses in their own language. And so now they want to split and form their own Orthodox wing of church. And the Oromo community, of course, is the largest community in Ethiopia. I mean, the things that happen in this continent sometimes, it's exhausting even to start. Like, we're in 21st century. What is so wrong? You can still do that. Like I've explained, in our local villages, we use our local dialects to conduct the services because that is what the people understand. But in urban areas where we have different communities, then we use the national languages, because we are serving a larger and broader congregant or any public function. So this should not advise a need for a church to split because they're not speaking your language. Go conduct services in the Oromo community, churches with the Oromo language, and still be one church. Because if you see such very dangerous ethnicity being mentioned in church, and church should be the safest heaven where you go and you don't feel like, oh, I'm from this community, oh, I'm from that community. It is a place where you should go and feel I'm in the house of God and I am comfortable and I'm just here to worship and just go home. So if we drag all this now, we're taking ethnicity from the political diocese and we're bringing it to the pulpits, and now that is a cause for that should worry. That should worry the rest of us. John Clark, you're saying, I came out strongly requesting Kenyans to spearhead by closing down our embassy in South Africa till South Africa improves other Africans' people. We are safe and security and order was restored. I think, yes, it's about time that other African nations, whether your citizens have been affected in South Africa or not, but should come out in support and just give a very strong message to President Cyril Ramaphosa and tell him this level of madness is unacceptable and we cannot allow our citizens to be affected and to be killed and to be maimed. In your country, you have a responsibility of protecting everybody in that country. And since there seems to be a lot of laxity in terms of bringing to book the perpetrators, I think they get away off so easily. That's why they're able to come after a while. They're just able to come out and do these xenophobic attacks to other people. Because I think the law there is not very stringent. It's not punitive enough, I think. So it's very lenient. So we're like, okay, whatever. They'll just be taken to the police custody maybe for a day or two and then let out. And then before you know it, they're organizing another xenophobic attack. The laws against xenophobia in South Africa, first of all, it needs to be punitive. Because now it is becoming a series of attacks. It's becoming like a norm there. And that should not be the case. So African countries should come and rally behind each other and say, you know what, and take a very strong stand against South Africa and against the government of Cyril Ramaphosa and say, you know what, if this even happens again, then this is what the rest of us will do. I think this is unacceptable. And they should come out very clearly and express it to the government of South Africa. This is just wrong in all levels. So there we go. And also something interesting here I read early in the morning, the price of mobile phone calls and data has sharply risen in Liberia. According to the two mobile phone companies operating in the country, the hike was ordered by government's telecoms agency over the weekend. Now over the weekend, right? So a scratch card costing $1 that used to allow customers to make unlimited calls for 72 hours. Listen, 72 hours. So if you could buy a card in Liberia last week for $1, that you'll have unlimited calls for at least 72 hours. Now, to those with the SIM card to the same phone company, if you're calling somebody, say in Kenya here Safaricom, and you're calling a person who has the same SIM card from Safaricom, then it will cost you $1 for 72 hours talking, unlimited calls. But now it will only give you 45 minutes of airtime. From 72 hours to 45 minutes of talk. Now let me tell you, that is not even the gist of the story. Now, let me tell you the reason that Liberian government is giving as to why they made this very crazy move. They're saying the cost of purchasing internet data has more than doubled, of course, and the political analysts say that the increase is a ploy by the government to restrain its critics from regularly calling radio talk shows. This is just stupid on another level. But the regulatory agency says the increase is intended to end a price war between the two mobile companies, which is affecting competition and to raise badly needed revenue for government. That is not true. That is not what you do. You know, like here, our telecommunications companies, Safaricom, Airtel, several of them, only those two major ones. I think, and there's another one, the third one at Orange or something. They're the major players here in mobile phone telecommunications, and they have been let there. They are very competitive, right? Because Kenyans will only, go towards where they feel they'll find a value for their money. So they should be let out there to just have their own, to be competitive like that. So when the government comes in and wants to regulate in this manner, and instead of, mostly you'll see the government coming in and perhaps decreasing, and when they're seeing like the subscribers or the customers are being exploited. But in this case, the government is the one which is imposing tariffs and things that looks like are going to exploit its own citizens. So you would buy a $1 talk card and it will last you for 72 hours. Right now, it will only last you 45 minutes. Like, not even one day, 45 minutes. And this is because critics are saying this should discourage those people who criticize the government from calling into radio talk shows in the morning to making those long phone calls and criticize the government. That is so stupid. Mr. George Weah has completely lost it. He would have stayed in the pitch, perhaps be the national coach for the Liberian football team, or just something else in the sports. But in the country, I think the recent developments from Liberia has been insane. You know, you read things and you're like, come on, George Weah, you could do better than this. You know what? So, I mean, there you go. Ozia Mtunzi, you're saying, true, Miriam, these killings are unacceptable. Mtunzi, Are you from South Africa? There's another show I love watching there, Scandals from South Africa. It's my favorite drama. And there's a character there called Mtunzi. Not a very good character. Yes, very corny and skimmy. I'm not saying that's what you are, but your name, could be there from South Africa. I don't know. And you're saying the killings are unacceptable. Yes. And this morning I'm very, very unhappy with what is happening to our fellow Africans there in South Africa. It is unacceptable. Whatever it is, life has to remain sacred. The minute we lose our mind and we want to express our frustrations by killing our fellow human beings, that is the point where no. That is where we should draw a line. And this should not just be called as xenophobia. These are criminal acts, and they should be handled as that. So this has been the Good Morning Africa show. Thank you so much for joining. Like I mentioned there earlier, at 3 p.m., Dr. Matanga will be joining us all the way from The Hague. He's there at the International Court of Justice, and he's there. And he filed a petition. He'll tell us about it, about the maritime row between Kenya and Somalia, and he will let us know about the latest developments in terms of that. So hopefully you can go grab your lunch. I'm hungry already because it's just a few minutes to 1 p.m. here in Kenya. And then we'll be back here at 3 p.m. For the latest update there and a special coverage all the way from The Hague there in Netherlands. But for now, I thank you so much for your patronage, for joining me and for keeping you company, for engaging with me and the rest of our viewers. And hopefully you can meet here later and continue commenting. I think we have to still talk about what is happening, especially in South Africa. And there's some other news there I was reading in Ethiopia. I think we need a special conversation in what is happening in Ethiopia and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And we also need to talk about the new developments in Cameroon. As I said, today I've been angered by so many things. Children from the Anglophone region in Cameroon have not been able to go to school. And what that might mean to this generation as they continue to grow, they will not have a level field playing ground when it comes to competing even for opportunities in the near future, because where were you when people are going to school? You did not have that opportunity. So this is a great injustice that I'm bothered. I'm really, really bothered. And I would wish that people who can bring change and who can continue agitating, of course, here, that's what we do. But we need bodies like the UN to come in and really have a serious talk and make sure that these children at least are able to go to school, and not only that, but they're able to be taught through a language that they understand. And French should not be imposed on the Anglophones. It is unnatural. You cannot come here and tell me to speak something that I don't know and teach me in it and expect me to understand and to pass those exams. It's unfair. It's just unfair and uncalled for. They can absolutely be taught in a language that they understand, and that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I cited example of the two languages that are being used in Canada. Is fine. One part speaks English. You go to other parts, it's predominantly French, but you still feel at home, and it's still okay. And nobody will criminalize you for that. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully you can meet here at 3 p.m. For the special coverage all the way from the International Court of Justice from The Hague. And Dr. Matanga will be joining me through live Skyping. So thank you so much. My name is Miriam Agutu. I'll see you here at 3 p.m. But for now, it is bye-bye.